We were totally unprepared for John's condition, and he was born in the middle of the night, and his father called to tell us that John was born, but that he was born without any arms or legs. And we didn't know until Tuesday that he had partial arms and legs. And you can imagine the emotions that were involved.
He was a beautiful little baby. That's all I remember. The doctors told us they didn't know what to make of it. They said, we don't know if this baby will live the night. We don't know how long he'll live. We don't know if other organs have been rearranged in his body. You better get him baptized very quickly and, hope for the best. Within a few weeks, I remember the baptism down in Binghamton. Even then, there was some doubt about, is he going to survive? Is something catastrophic going to happen with his body?
Good morning. Did you notice what just happened? I just made a first impression on many of you. And do you know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to do everything in my power to help you forget this first impression. See, this is what I've done my whole life. You see, the most important skill I've acquired as a person with a physical disability is that I'm keenly aware of how my first impression affects us. I want to take a step back and explain a little bit about who I am and how I got here. I'm a congenital amputee, born 40 years ago in Binghamton, New York, without the extension of my arms and my legs. Through many doctors' debates and doctors' conversations, my parents and then me as an adult, doctors disagree as to why. But the bottom line, it really doesn't matter why, because I'm never going to thumb wrestle with you. I'm never going to be the center of the basketball team here at Dairyfield. What matters is how I deal with the body that I have and the person that I am. If in your future you ever do any sales study or self-help study, one of the first points that are made are that first impressions are everything. And while they are to most people, I've spent my lifetime trying to overcome that first impression. And I would argue that first impressions may not be unimportant, but certainly can be overcome.
My first occasion to meet John was I was interviewing for a job here. And I was sitting in a classroom watching a 9th grade class, might have been a 10th grade class. And in comes this kid, and you can imagine if you know John, who I had no idea about, comes popping in late. There's a desk in the back. He just did what John does, is kind of waddled and popped up onto the desk and started taking notes. And of course you have to walk away with an impression when you see that and you go, this is pretty cool.
I actually heard about John before I actually met John, because I was the dean of students at the time. The head of the school wanted to know how I felt about the potential of this child without arms and legs coming to the school. How we were going to handle it and how I felt about it, because he was going to ask me if I was able to help John when John needed help. And I said, fine. And then I met John, obviously, shortly after that. And it was interesting when you first see John, because he does look different. But it didn't take long before, John was just John, and our building was not handicap accessible at that time. And so we had, obviously, basic things we had to deal with. How would he get to his classes up and downstairs, because we didn't have an elevator? How would he take his tests, things like that. But John, knew how to write with a pencil and a pen, and he would complain like all the other kids when he had writer's cramp. I think it did become pretty seamless after a while that, the stuff that was a little bit different was just part of a normal daily routine, and everything else, John went to assembly, he went to class, he did everything else like every other student here.
The thing that immediately stands out to me, based on my experience with him, is he never once did he ask for special help, accommodation. There was never, I can't do this, can you help me with this? It's always, I'm going to do it. On the surface of things, you would think it wasn't very hard at all, because he never gave you any visible evidence that it was hard, but I'm pretty sure on some level it was difficult for him.
Here would be my adage on teenagers. You take the most confident teenager and you scratch them, and you'll find their insecurities. I'm sure that there were moments where John didn't feel as buoyant as he looked, because that's the nature of teenagers. It had to change the tempo, the rhythm, the consciousness of the school. So, I mean, it's something as simple as walking down the hall with John or having a conversation with John. I think it was such a gift to some of the other kids because it changed how they had to interact. They had to make more of a conscious effort to incorporate John's style. And anytime you can get a teenager to get outside their tunnel vision is a win.
I'm a sales manager for a television station. I manage a staff of 4 people and the day-to-day operations of the sales organization. At the same time, I volunteer in my community, and I do speak publicly about overcoming my challenges. I've always wanted to be involved in media and television. It took me a good 4 years to find that job. It was discouraging times, sure. You know, you want to be seen as the person that you are in total, not just the shell that you are on the outside. But I knew that in time the opportunities would come. You know, the 20 or 25 interviews that I had over 4 years, that's hundreds of resumes. Hundreds. If I really were going to give up, I would have given up after the first 10 or 20. But that's not who I am. I want to continue to grow, no matter what I do. I interviewed with a station in Syracuse, hit it off with the local sales manager. He was interested in how I sold, not who I was or what I looked like.
It was difficult to get him hired. The upper management was not totally thrilled with someone with his physical abilities. They were afraid that, you know, he would demand that we put in special handicap equipment around the building, and it was going to cost money, that he might be a problem. Saying he had a meeting with my boss, and a typical kind of an old-fashioned question that sales managers used to ask, if they'd pick up something from their desk like a coffee cup or a stapler and say, "Sell me this coffee cup." And most people would hold up the coffee cup and say, well, it's blue, it's got a handle. And John did something that I've never seen anyone do before, and that is he did a customer needs analysis. In other words, instead of just talking about the coffee cup, he questioned the sales manager and said, well, do you drink a lot of coffee? Do you drink coffee? Do you drink tea? How much do you drink a day? In other words, he found out information about how that potential customer would use the coffee cup. And that's one of the things that's very important in sales is you don't go in and say, here's our product. You go in and say, what do you need? Yeah, I think he blew him away at that point.
He earns everything he gets in our business. So, you know, you're not being paid by the hour and they're just throwing somebody a bone, you know, just because he's a nice guy. In our business, you earn your living by being paid on commission. So you have to get the job done yourself. And there aren't a lot of other people around to help you do that.
If somebody hires me, I want to make sure I do a good job. If I don't do a good job, I don't deserve the job. Andy James, please. That's one of the nice things about being in sales is that there's less of, do I deserve the job? Am I employed because I'm disabled? Andy John Robinson, how you doing? Not much. We're coming over today at 3. Is that all right with you? I'll be there. See you then. Yeah, bye. You know, I'm employed because I do what I do, and that's raise revenue for whomever I'm working for. I've seen people fail in sales because they take rejection personally, but that just means you haven't looked for the right solutions to what the problems are. Being a person with disabilities my whole life, I've realized that you have to overcome whatever objection you're dealt with, yourself first and then others around you. Really, it comes down to problem solving, introducing yourself to new prospects, being able to have a good conversation, and then show the features and benefits of whatever it is that you're talking about. And if it's a win-win for everybody, then it should be a success.
Knock, knock.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, how you doing? How have you been?
Doing well.
Good?
Just finishing up something here. I remember when John first came in and he introduced himself. I guess, yeah, he made an impression on me for, you know, a few different reasons. Yeah, he just came across as, you know, just an average everyday guy. In most cases, he comes in and we just, you know, talk about what we're going to do in the next quarter. It's pretty, you know, laid back. I've gone out with him to lunch, to dinner, for drinks. and he just moves right along just like anybody else. He just gets it done. John is definitely a glasses half full guy, which I can tell you more people maybe than not are not that way, and they have everything going for them physically. It's pretty inspirational, I'd say.
John is so comfortable with himself and doesn't see himself as being disabled that he puts everybody else at ease. I mean, the ability for him to walk into a room, extend his arm, shake somebody's hand, just totally normalizes the situation and takes all the stuff that people have around people with disabilities away.
We moved to Manchester, New Hampshire, which is the largest city in New Hampshire, around about the time I was going to junior high. So stayed there through high school and through college years. It was a nice place. The town embraced us. My father was the Episcopal priest in town. We had a nice, small lifestyle, nice sheltered lifestyle where we had a nice support system. You know, the father's the priest, so he's got to sort of be on display. If there is such a thing, the typical priest's wife where, you know, make sure everybody's happy, and we host events and dinner parties or whatever, and then the kids have to look perfect and sit in church and sit still. And we tried very hard to, you know, to have a typical lifestyle. I was the first child, the oldest child. My parents really didn't know what they were getting into, I guess, at that point, not having children before, so they went through what they would consider their typical pregnancy. You know, it was a time that there were no sonograms. My mom would tell stories after that, you know, I would sort of tumble head to foot inside her belly, not sort of the normal roll, but sort of a different roll, and she asked the doctor, you know, is he supposed to roll this much? And of course the doctor thought that's, you know, just a normal first pregnancy question.
My wife and I had talked about having children, and we're both interested in that. I was a young beginning minister at age 27, I guess, and my wife was a year younger. In the spring, turned out she was pregnant, and we were both just thrilled. There was a lot of excitement, starting a new job, moving to a new city, beginning my work to assist in a very large and active parish. On the 1st of December, I preached on what Advent was about that morning, and I used the idea of having a baby as the example. How you prepare for it, you get the room ready, but until it's there, it's not there, and that's a little bit like Christmas. My wife didn't feel like going to church that morning, and I got home from church, and she had fixed a turkey dinner for the two of us. I said, what on earth? And she said, well, I just felt like cooking today. And then she said, well, actually, I'm having some contractions. So we timed them, and we went into the hospital 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. The gynecologist who had been with us and was a parishioner that we liked very much had gone hunting somewhere. So he was not available, and some other man in his practice was available. Eventually the doctor said, I think we'll have to do a cesarean. Things are not progressing quite the way they should. And it was probably 9:30 or so in the evening. Finally, the doctor came out that I had never met before. Came to the door of the waiting room, and he held out his hand, and he said, Mr. Robinson. I said, yes. And he said, come here. He said, well, there's a major problem with your child. He doesn't seem to have any arms below his elbows, and very short legs, and but he seems to be healthy. So come up and see your wife. So I was just I guess in shock at that point. And so it was a very horrendous evening for us. As soon as I saw him, I could see instantly he was a Robinson. I recognized his face. And as they kind of moved the blankets for me to see him, he screamed and cried loudly, very vigorously. And they had told me he was strong, could breathe well. And so I thought, you go right ahead and scream. You have a right to scream. It's not fair. They put him back in the incubator and kind of took me away because I was having trouble standing up at that point. I think one has a mental image, or I did, about what a son or daughter would be. And in my case, I was not athletic. I was better at music. So I thought, well, if I have a son, I'm going to work to see that he's more athletic and can run and do these things better than I can. The experience becomes more like a death. than a birth. In this case, it's the death of some of those hopes and dreams, the death of your image of what this baby could be, the death of some of the things you have thought about in the future. And people's reactions are kind of like that, and they gather together, if you have good friends, and kind of as one would after a death. The next day after John was born, she said, I can't look at him. I can't stand it. And so she wouldn't see the baby. And I thought, what on earth will I do with this, my wife and with this baby? Something has to be done. And then the doctor came back from hunting, the doctor we knew and cared about. And he said to her, you know, when you buy a new car, you don't know how it's going to be, you don't know how it's going to work out. But he said, what about if you took him home for a while and see how it goes? And I would suggest, you hold him and see how it feels. So she agreed, and he stood with her, and then they got me, and they brought him in, the baby, my son John, and put him on my wife's lap in the bed, and they undressed him. We undressed him together so she could see what he looked like. And from that moment on, of course, she recognized her baby. In the meantime, the medical people had contacted a very noted doctor in East Orange, New Jersey, Dr. Kai-Ho Kim, who was a Korean who was a specialty in artificial arms and legs and congenital amputee problems. And they made us an appointment down there. I think John was 6 weeks old, at the most 6 weeks. They began to push us to do things that I wasn't ready to do, like they wanted to show us all kinds of movies of congenital amputee children and kids with artificial arms and legs ironing clothes and doing this, that, and the other. And I didn't want to see that. It was easier to wrap the baby in a blanket and pretend that he's just great as he was. And then the doctor pulled his surprise. He had a room full of students, medical students, nurses, and pre-med people. And he said, I want to use your baby in his example. So he suddenly picked the baby up, stripped him naked, and held him up for the entire classroom of people to see, at which point John peed all over the front line of the whole row of the room. Once again, I said, go for it, kid. If life has done you a deal, you can get back. We began very early on having artificial arms made, and eventually artificial legs, because that was something that was looking to the future. It became a yearly event, like getting new shoes for a kid that grows. We had to keep getting artificial arms and legs made.
None of us initially felt that he would ever walk. None of us really felt he could have any kind of normal life. We just couldn't conceive of it. The real issue right from the start was, can he feed himself? And so when he learned to pick up objects, that was a major victory, because the whole thought was, if he can't feed himself, the unspoken thing was he'll have to be institutionalized. Nobody wanted to see that happen. We were going to fight to the end to prevent that.
One of the toys somebody gave him was a little wooden peg bench with a hammer, and he wasn't strong enough to use the little wooden tapping hammer. Somebody gave him a real true value ball peen hammer, and he could hit the pegs then when he could hold that under his arms. So he was a dangerous kid pretty soon.
We got a pickle jar, and we used to put him in there, and he could rest his arms on the edges, and he learned to stand. And then it was said he would never walk. And we had a stroller cut down by a man who was a welder.
He bent the legs of this walker so that they were much lower, so that John's legs could touch the ground when he was in the little seat. And he was cruising his way through several hundred people every Sunday morning, just showing off and having a wonderful time.
I mean, I can't tell you how happy we were to see him crawling around and being mobile, because there was some thought, well, maybe he'll never be able to go anywhere. He'll just sit there or lay there. Well, not John. He got mobile, and then eventually he figured out a way to stand up, and he had an iron will. He still does.
This wonderful lady started a little nursery school when he was probably 4 years old, so that John could mingle with other children and kind of prepare him for kindergarten, although it was said that he wouldn't be able to go to school. Well, she did a wonderful job. And then the principal there said that John couldn't go unless he wore the artificial arms and legs.
At school, 2 hours a day, I'd be in the prosthetics, and then for the rest of the time, I'd be myself. Didn't really learn to walk until the 4th grade in them, because I didn't want to. I was pretty stubborn about it. But then I spent, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade walking around in school for a few hours a day with the artificial arms. Had physical therapy to learn how to use the arms, to learn how to, bend the knee, to, just sort of to adapt to what they thought at the time was the way I would be an adult.
It was kind of sad to see that. I mean, I don't know. It wasn't John.
And I remember going down for one Christmas program. John was playing the bells with his artificial arms. And I knew it was a misery. I knew him so well. It was painful for him. And the other children were behind him singing The Little Drummer Boy. It just broke my heart. But then there are many things about it all that have broken my heart, so.
It is a mix, and you don't always know the balance of excruciating pain. When you hurt for your child, you can't do a thing about it for some things, but feel that pain. You can't fix whatever it is, so all you can do is hurt.
I think my mother had a difficult time, and rightfully so. I mean, I wouldn't judge her now or judge anyone now on their situation. As we all know, life throws us some curveballs at times, and my mother created what she felt at the time was what the household that she wanted under the circumstances that she had.
She had this sense of just inner power, and you did feel strong when you were with her. She's a very confident woman. She would find something that was in common with somebody and then make that person feel special and make them value themselves. But on the other side, if there were issues that she felt you weren't going in the right direction, she would let you know.
In general, there was Priscilla's way, and then there was the rest of the world. I mean, she got her way most of the time. I think my son inherited that in large measure because it stood him well in getting through, in keeping going when you don't want to keep going.
And what she demanded of me was let's not use a crutch. Let's not use an excuse. You have what you want. And if you use an excuse, it's not to your benefit.
I think pride to her was everything. You hold your head up high and you just go forward and you be your best. And John did. John did everything. She made sure that he was in a school environment that he would be surrounded by the best. When you have someone behind you like that, you don't want to disappoint them. And I think that's what drives John.
It's fair to say that as a child, I didn't like the prosthesis. And as I got older, I could see instances where it would be helpful. But, as a kid, you want to run around, you want to play with your friends. You're not thinking that you're shorter necessarily. You want to throw a ball. You want to be able to write with your pencil easily and quickly without thinking about it. I had at that point adapted to be able to write, take notes or whatever. And then in high school, once we moved to New Hampshire and decided, did I want to consider that again? That was the point the doctor said, okay, well, you're going to have to cut your feet off if you really want to wear legs forever. I thought that was the end of that. No way was I going for that. So, see ya. I think adolescence was really difficult. Maybe because it's difficult for everybody. I was different, and dating was different, and friends are different in high school, and they're playing sports. You know, they're playing lacrosse and running around the soccer field and playing baseball, and those are things that I wanted to do but couldn't. So much like everything else, find your way, find where your path is.
He wanted to use one of my golf clubs. I was afraid he'd break it, but I gave him my putter and crossed my fingers, and he began to putt. And he tried some other clubs, to the point that ultimately I bought a set of used clubs and realized that the angle of the irons was just right. He could hit a ball 150 yards straight down the fairway. So from then on, he just took over. There was nothing for me to do. He could beat me.
He realized early on that I had an interest in sports, and there are sports I can play and couldn't play. But with the handicap system in golf, I can play golf.
I mean, it still is remarkable to me. You know, someone basically with no arms and no legs in a sport that requires you to, you know, to make turns and you know, you're holding a golf club, you know, and how does somebody do that without any arms? You think about that, and actually to even strike the ball and hit it, and John does it, and every single time he does, till this day, I still sit there and say, that's just unbelievable. That is unbelievable.
I'm not going to win any golf tournaments, but I really like to play, to get out there. Because, you know, in my mind, I'm just a golfer. The same issues that everybody else has, that, you know, my putting stinks, my short game stinks, I wish my driving was longer and straighter. You know, it's all the same as everybody else.
I've been with John in situations that hurt me. I mean, it really did. And John would never say anything. You know, people, especially little children at times, they don't know how to react, and they'd say things that would cut me to the quick. I'd like to, you know, I was thinking to myself, go away, kid, you know.
Mary Pop, what are you?
Colonial Day.
Colonial?
Yes.
First year that we moved in here, every kid flipped out, and their parents weren't quite sure what to do either. Someday I'm gonna wear ketchup on the ends of my arms and all over my face and do it up when the kids are older and they can handle it. The door.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
He's weird.
Spaceman and a penguin.
Yeah.
He's weird. You know, the kids will say anything comes to their mind. They don't stop. There's no filter on it. Halloween's even extra special because they're in a costume. They'll say anything. Parents aren't usually near the door. They're by the road, I mean, so. One time, Andrew and I and Hayden were walking down the street in Toronto. Kids would always stop and point and stare and all the normal stuff that they do, and parents usually try to pull their kids away and try to keep them quiet. But one kid was really obnoxious, but it wasn't the kid so much that was bad, it was the parent that started beating the kid halfway down the street afterwards. That was really difficult to stomach because, you know, the kid's just being a kid. I mean, if Hayden was about the same age as this kid that was getting completely, you know, abused, and, you know, I wouldn't have done that to Hayden at that point just for saying something that was normal. You know, other kids say things and, you know, I try to make a joke out of it or make them laugh about it. I mean, I've had my moments too where I've been obnoxious right back to them and said, you know, you better watch out. You got to eat your vegetables, or you could end up looking like this. You know, you got to be careful. You can't do that either. How you react to it's how you know, will make the situation easier, and it'll make the parents of the kids feel at ease, and then everything sort of works out.
He never told me privately or any other way that it bothered him. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that it didn't bother him. I mean, he's a compassionate, caring, insightful person, and you can't tell me that some things haven't gotten to him, but you wouldn't know it by talking to him or by being around him. He's upbeat, he's positive. He just refuses to feel sorry for himself.
It wasn't until I graduated high school that I learned how to dress myself. If I wanted to put jeans on or dress pants or needed help with buttons, I hadn't come to a point in my life where I wanted to figure it out on my own and had used my parents or teachers at school. Knowing that I was graduating from high school and realizing, hey, it's time to be independent, I really spent a lot of time figuring out how could I get it done? How could we develop processes that I could be independent in dressing?
All through high school, I couldn't figure out how to button pants up. I couldn't get my arms to the waist. So what we figured is if we put a big piece of Velcro along the waistband, that it would be a longer. So we figured out that if you sewed the Velcro there and then had the flap available and put it through the buttonhole and then pull it tight, it's stronger, so it'll stay together. So we did this in high school. So the year I went to college, I was able to dress myself completely because that was the only thing I couldn't figure out how to do was hook my pants up.
Both dressing and driving became the two most important things towards my independence to go to Syracuse. And I figured them both out within a year.
When it came for his leaving home and going to college, that was one of the most painful days for me. To let him go was just excruciating for me. I hated to lose him. And we just crossed our fingers and said our prayers, and off he went.
I'll be honest, I was never thrilled with his choice of Syracuse University. I thought it was too big a school, too impersonal. I felt that he wouldn't get the close relationships that he'd need, and that it just wasn't going to work. And of course, I was dead wrong, I might add. John was right, I was wrong. I freely admit it. And when I dropped him off that first day, I just was like, is this going to work out? Is he going to be safe? Is he going to be happy? I was quite apprehensive.
While it was difficult for me to go away to college, it was absolutely what I needed to do. I knew I didn't want to be within the confines of my teenage years at home because I wanted to push my own boundaries. So I wanted and craved to go away to a big school, chose a big school on purpose. There were times where I needed help. The state and the school both provided them to me when needed, but it was about my independence. You know, if I can learn how to drive a car when people didn't think I could, and I can learn how to dress myself when I didn't think I could, I can do this. I can go out and meet new people. Now, I may not have done it the right way. I turned a lot of my future friends off by being obnoxious, mainly because they didn't know how to deal with people for the first time.
I think he definitely had something to prove. And I think coming into the university environment with thousands of people, it was very easy for him to say, well, you know what, I'm going to be a little hard. And that way, I guess maybe nobody would, run over him, so to speak. And that was his defense mechanism, I guess.
My attitude was I needed to be this tough external person to be able to survive. And I'm sure the people that I interacted with, some dealt with me and some didn't, but the ones that dealt with me became my good friends. It allowed me the space and the time to realize, you know what, I am who I am. I don't need to be that way. And the people that like me will like me for who I am, not what I look like.
Maybe when we first met him initially, we thought, geez, you have to be nice to him. But come the second time after we met John, that was definitely out the door. We give him crap like anybody else. Hey, we argue, it doesn't matter. It's just, he's just one of the guys.
My independence culminated for me at one moment. My friends and I were in an establishment, and any time that I was in a long line or in a group of people, I used to get between as close as I could to my friends. And we were leaving one night, and I was as close to Craig and Dave as I possibly could get. And this woman looked down at me, and she screamed for everybody to hear, "If you get off your knees, this line would move a lot faster." And Craig and Dave thought that was the funniest thing they heard. They laughed and laughed, and I laughed as well. It was a good moment. We laughed about it on the way back to the dorm, and we told other friends. But pretty soon after that, I realized I had to get off my knees, that the world owes me nothing, that I make my own success, my own breaks, and don't expect anybody to give you anything unless you're willing to work for it. And to me, get off my knees means be willing to work hard. Be willing to put the effort in to be the person you want to be. I got my degree in television, radio, film management, and had been getting applications and resumes out all through senior year, but nothing was coming about. I accepted a job with a publisher in Ontario. It was great, not because of the job, because the job wasn't great, but it was great because I got to be independent and I got to meet Andrea.
I met John in June of 1991, and he moved in to the house next door to me. I rented a house in Toronto. I was a nursing student. We had like a parking area behind our row of houses, and John drove into the back, and I'm sure my reaction was like everybody else's. In the next couple of days, I went downstairs when I saw him out there. I wanted to see what he had in the car that he could drive it, and then we got talking, and then he started spending more time at our house, and that was all downhill after that.
We hit it off pretty well, from a friendship standpoint right away. She was fiercely independent, and I was too. She made dinner right away for me and invited me over for dinner, and she made spare ribs, and she didn't think about spare ribs being messy. And then as I walked in the door that day, she said, "Oh my goodness, I made spare ribs. Can you eat them?" I said, "Oh yeah, I can eat them. Don't worry." We went to a Toronto Blue Jays baseball game right away. We went to a 50,000-seat stadium for our first date, not worrying about what people are looking at. With Andrea, I wasn't necessarily worried about what other people thought.
We dated for a couple of years. I was already a mom, so we didn't go out a lot. We used to sit out on the front porch and watch people go by and do the same things we do now, talk politics and life. The only person who ever questioned my relationship with John was my brother. I think he was concerned that maybe I would give up hiking and outdoor things because I was with John. When my brother asked me if I was sure if this was a good idea or not, my answer was pretty short, that yes, I thought that this was the right thing. I think there's a lot more to a long-lasting relationship than whether or not you can camp together. John's been camping a couple of times, actually. It's not his favorite thing, but I think my family was more accepting of John than John's family was of me, which I think even then it surprised me. Now, when I look back on it, it really surprises me. I don't know if they thought I had an ulterior motive or I don't know, but it did take a while for them to warm up to me.
They both were unsure, wanted to make sure it was the right thing for everybody, but I think they realized that it was the right thing for me and for Andrea.
We had just gotten to that point in our relationship where we were really comfortable with each other, and I think we just assumed that it was going to work out.
We were engaged, and we planned to be married, and then 18 months later or so, we were married on my grandmother's farm. We had a small family wedding on a beautiful sunny day, and I put Andrea's ring on her hand, and she put mine around, it was attached to my necklace at the time, and she put the necklace around my neck.
We talked about kids before we even got married. He didn't want to have a disabled child and feel responsible for that. We went and saw a genetic counselor at Toronto General Hospital. He didn't feel that the way John's case presented, that it could be genetic. So he was pretty sure that we could go ahead and have kids. And we both had reservations, and I think that's normal.
When we knew we were pregnant, I'm sure my mom was going through some of those emotional pangs of when she had me. But having the grandchildren around was the next stage in her life that she was really looking forward to. When she got sick, she realized she wasn't going to have that.
I remember the day when she called me and she told me it was ALS. And I said, okay, well, we'll figure something out, And she started to cry and she said, no, I do have, a limited amount of time. And I guess it didn't really hit me.
It was one of those moments like John being born. It was like incomprehensible when we heard ALS. I didn't even know what that was. I mean, Lou Gehrig's, I'd heard the name. I had no idea. And then when I found out what it involved, it was like, oh my God, this can't be real.
For a while, she had to use certain braces and things, and she managed to still work. She wanted to work. She wanted to still be with people. She didn't want to succumb to it. And eventually, she got to a point where she couldn't work, and she had to be in a wheelchair. It was just a progression. The worst part of it all was when she had to leave her home. And her home was it was her. And I remember that day when she had to leave, she went around and she touched everything because it was tough. She ended up going into the nursing home. When I look at how it unfolded, she lost her ability to get around as much as John had when he started his life.
Andrea had Ariel, and then 9 months later, Mom passed. So for 9 months, we went up to New Hampshire as often as possible from Syracuse. Mom got to see that dream fulfilled and to meet her granddaughter. To my parents, the big questions were answered. Was I going to be able to eat and feed myself? Was I going to be able to have friends? Was I going to get an education and get a job and have a family? Having Ariel was the last question, I suppose, for my parents. Having Ariel was a blessing I can't even explain. The great irony was I was doing what everybody else is doing, looking for the 10 fingers and 10 toes, and not having them myself. But it is sort of the culmination of things that I had built up in my head, of the can it be questions. I don't really have any more can it be this way questions. My mom taught me how to be a person, maybe more than anybody else. So I was able to deal with my physical challenges because of what my mom taught me, because of that independence to get through whatever that comes your way. So as Mom got sick, and Mom was going through her own physical challenges, and her challenges were a lot worse than mine, and I learned from her on how to deal with that with a smile on your face. She knew it was the end, but didn't avoid it.
The circle, went all the way around. Chris ended up, needing tons of help, which John did, right at the beginning. Physical impurities aren't going to hold him down.
My relationship with my dad is pretty good. I noticed my dad wasn't like other dads when I was around 5. Owen is about the same height as my dad right now. I think Owen gets that he's different. Some of my favorite things to do are to hang out with my friends and to swim. If my dad comes in, he usually just sits and talks. My friends do not ask me questions about my dad, but sometimes I see people looking at him like, why is he like that? He's really not that different. He just looks different. I think my family is basically the same as everyone else's, except my dad just can't reach very high.
I don't really remember, initial feelings of him. He's been a father figure as long as I really remember. He could still play, hockey and basketball and stuff, so, it wasn't really that different. The only really big difference that I can remember was that since I was, 8, I've been able to beat him in basketball. I remember we used to play wiffle ball, and he taught me how to throw a curveball when I was a little kid. Sometimes I honestly, didn't even expect him to do stuff like that with me. And he would, dissect my pitching motion and be like, all right, well, you need to do a little more of this, a little more of that. And I was surprised that like he would know that sort of stuff. Growing up, there were like several things that I can think of that for me or for like my friends were just like normal things. Cooking, for example, for him cooking was more difficult. It's that, I mean, that happens to everybody. Everyone has something they just can't do. They're just not good at. He's always wanted me to be extremely motivated and been there to push me to get what I need done. I think it is maybe because he worked really hard for what he has, and he realizes that if he can instill the same drive in me, it'll make me a more successful person, I guess. It's one of the reasons I did well in high school, was that he was there pushing me. We're both huge sports fans, and neither of us agree with each other on anything. We talk about sports, talk about politics, I don't know, talk about just regular stuff. I kind of personally think he'll go into politics at some point. I think he'd be good at politics. But I think, I don't know, whatever he decides he wants to do, he will get done. He's a very driven man.
I love being a dad. It's more than what I ever could have hoped. It's more challenging than I ever could have hoped. But I suppose every parent can say that.
I don't think his disability really comes into his parenting all that much because he's forced to do everything. You know, he's changed diapers and made a mess and fed the kids.
We go to children's events, skating, swimming, hockey. You know, I love hockey. It's my favorite sport by far. So to be able to watch Owen play hockey, it does make you think that while I'm trying not to live vicariously through him, and I don't want to force him to do anything, I would give almost anything to be in his place, to be able to do the suicide drills and skate up and down the ice and shoot the puck.
Good job, buddy.
All the things that I couldn't do. I want them to enjoy this because I'm enjoying watching them and realizing that I didn't get that chance.
I think he has a really good relationship with the kids. I always wanted to have that kind of family where everybody did things together, and when the kids were little, I always made sure that, you know, John had time with them. I always had to work weekends, so I think that was a good thing. I think that made John be more responsible with the kids.
Andrea and I have developed a really good balance as to who does what. Because of my physical challenges, she ends up taking more of the physical burden. You know, she's taking out the garbage. She's doing a lot of the lifting. She's putting things up high. I am doing as much as I can of the things that I can do. So if it's give Owen a bath or making sure they do their homework, we do find the balance of what can I do, I'll do. You know, what is easier for her to do, she'll do. And she's doing the right thing and making sure that I don't slack off in doing that.
I definitely make him normal. I don't take any nonsense. If he says he can't do something, chances are that's not really true. He probably can do it. Most of the time, if he can't do something, it's because he really chooses not to do it.
You know, I will challenge myself to make sure I go camping a few times a year. We do hike together. She has convinced me to do some mountains in the Adirondacks as a family, which have been great moments. Mount Joe is a 700 vertical climb. It's 2,800 feet above sea level, but to me, it's the biggest mountain I'll ever do. And I may not do it with a smile on my face necessarily, and I may have a lot of dirt on me at the end of it, but it is something that I'm proud that I do with them. Andrea can hike up and down Mount Joe in 45 minutes, up and down. It takes me a good 3.5 hour round trip to be able to do it. It's probably an hour and 15 up, and then 2+ hours to come down, because it's that much harder to fall down rocks than it is to climb up rocks.
All right, that hurt.
I'm not one necessarily to rest if I'm going to go like that. You know, the way my body works, it's better if I go at a steady pace. When I can lift my leg up like I would with a stair, I'll do that. More times than not, I'm really trying to just pull myself up as I would in a chair with my arms. You know, a lot of cases in my life, I've built strength in my back and my arms and my neck because I'm using them like most people would use their legs. So climbing is much the same way. I mean, it's dirtier, it's harder, it's on a rock, it hurts. I'm scraping myself, but I'm pulling myself up onto the next ledge or into the next crevice. And if I can walk it, great. If I can step up, fine. More times than not, I'm flopping on my belly and trying to pull myself up. It is an uphill crawl. The first time I did it, my shirt was mud, caked mud. I'm not going to do it every day, and I certainly am sore for a day or two after. But I'm proud that I've done it. I'm glad that my kids get to see it. Maybe my kids don't realize it now, but you know what? Dad got out and hiked with us, you know, with short legs and short arms at 40 years old, climbing over boulders and falling down and being completely muddy, and doing it because it was good for my kids, it was good for me, and it was great for Andrea and I.
Cool. You all right? It's tough.
Made it.
You can get bogged down in your little world, but the greater importance is to realize that, you know, you have to be happy with what you have. You know, I have a blessed with a good family and a good career, and that's what's important. You know, do I wish I was different at times? Sure, but you know, not today, not right this moment. You know, is it going to take me twice as long to get down this hill? Yeah. Do I wish it wasn't? Yes, but it is, and that's what I can suck it up and do it.
I just think that everybody could learn something by seeing the fact that somebody who has an obvious reason to be different doesn't choose to be different, that you can succeed anyway.
He immeasurably enriched our lives. And I think he's a better person for what he's been through. And not only, it's not like it's not over for him. And he said to me once, I have to get up every day and face the world, and I have to have that kind of stubbornness and determination, or I wouldn't do it. And he's absolutely right. It's like, well, the cross in Christianity is the central thing, because it's the mystery of suffering leading to joy.
I think about my own grandchildren, and I think, this is what I want. I want them to be like John. You know, I want them to be happy. I want them to be successful. I want them to have their own families and to, you know, to enjoy life. And I think John does.
I keep what I call hodgepodge notebooks, and anything that interests me, I keep. And I pasted that in my notebook, and I came across it the other day. It was just something he wrote to me, and he said, we find our way. And John has found his way.
Whether it's the challenge of this, or the challenge of the mountain, or the challenge of parenting, or the challenge of a career, that's been what I'm about. I want to work hard to be the person I am today and tomorrow.